What's up, Pacer Nation? Welcome back to another episode here of your go-to Pacers podcast. Hope you all had a wonderful weekend. It is Monday morning, and we are excited to be talking with you. Facci is no longer mad at me for criticizing his trade list, but he is here to rejoin me and talk about trade ideas. So you know what? If you're mad about all the trade stuff involving the Pacers, you came to the right place to listen to your favorite episodes here on Setting the Pace. Facci, welcome back, man. How you doing?
I'm back. I'm feeling good, and I got a couple names you just might not like. So, we're gonna go through a couple actual potential trades. Not saying these are realistic to happen, but we did our trade targets. This is more of what would it take to get some of the guys that we might be interested in the Pacers acquiring. Now, look, we've talked about this. We like this team right now. It's good, but could there be room to make this team better? Always.
Yeah, and what's really funny is I think last time we were talking, you were saying something like, Alex, you do these six-team trades and they're crazy and blah, 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 blah.
You love them.
I'm just going to spoil everybody. There is a six-team trade that I came
Oh
up with
my
for
God.
Facci.
There it is. I mean,
For
look,
Facci.
I
It's
just
here.
can't wrap my mind around a six. Once it goes to three, I'm like, whoa, I'm living on the edge right now. We're getting a little wild. But the four, five, six teamers, they're crazy. You don't typically see them, but they are a lot of fun to kind of put together and maybe imagine or dream if it's possible or not.
Yeah, I will say the only reason I even came up with this idea is because of all of the speculation out there with what it will take for the Suns to get Jimmy Butler. There has been talk about five teams involved. So to make it a six team, that would be the Pacers. But before we get into that, I thought it would be fun just to kind of start things off slowly, build our ways up. I definitely have more trades than Facci. I think Facci told me he had five.
Six. I like to, get a little crazy
That's
over
all
here.
right. I mean,
I thought I'd have five. I thought I would, and then I started just going down a spiral. I said, all right, let me keep this list to six. I always like to go one over what we planned on.
okay, so I've got like four that I felt like could be realistic that are worth talking about, and then I've got a six additional to that in terms of talking point conversation stuff. So I've got a total of 10. So we're gonna have to go through this pretty quickly here, so we're
Giving
not
you
taking up all your
zero
time. This will
time.
be a
So
two-part episode, just so you guys know. So Bachi, let's start off here with our kind of realistic deals. I called these the medium deals that make sense. Do you want me to go first, or do you want to go first?
I'll go with a baby deal. This is a small one. We're dipping a toe here. So in this situation, it's a name that I brought up last episode. We're calling up Portland and we're seeing if Duop Reith can be had. Now, here's the thing. We've talked about the situation. I'm not going to go into, what their logistics are at center, but they are loaded at center. And this is a Portland team that is not winning games anytime soon. So here's the trade. Duop Reith for James Wiseman, who can be cut, and a 2027 second round pick from Utah. So that pick could be good, but we don't know. It's really a mystery bag. But Portland's getting a second round pick in the future. They're not taking really any salary back. The Pacers get Duop Reith. They round out their center rotation for this season. What are
Yeah,
your
I
thoughts?
basically had the exact same deal written down over here. It's the most boring thing to talk about, but it does make sense.
Yes.
So
So
I
I
did a couple boring ones because I'm just like, we got to bring the boring ones up because it's probably the most realistic. But I definitely had a lot of fun with some of the trades I came up with. I mean, I told you guys I have a six-team trade coming up later in this podcast, so you guys are going to love that. But well, you might not love it, but you will be intrigued by the conversation. But to keep it simple, I did the same thing. I think mine was like 2025 second round pick, but like regardless, like
yeah.
just a second round pick plus Wiseman for Duop Reith made a lot of sense.
If we could do the 2025 instead, that'd be great because Indiana has quite a few of those, and
Yeah.
they're not expected to be good second round picks. For reference, Pacers have their second round pick. They have a heavily protected Charlotte and a heavily protected Miami second round pick, so those likely aren't to materialize this year.
Yeah. And I'll just do my next one here because it's like the exact same
Mhm.
setup. I did this one before I did the Do Up Breathe one. I was like, you know what? I like Do Up Breathe a lot. I should have put him on my list. I didn't because we talked about him so much. So my other one was James Wiseman in a second round pick. The Charlotte one that's top 55 protected to Washington for Anthony Gill.
Anthony Gill. What's the situation with Anthony Gill? Like, is
Well,
he?
I honestly couldn't tell you anything about Anthony Gill right now. I don't even know if he's playing any
Okay.
minutes or not. He might be
I,
getting in the rotation.
I was gonna say, I'm like, that is a name that I have not heard a single thing about. So,
He's
in
an
your situation,
expiring contract.
okay.
He's
So,
played 31 games this year. He is a 6'7" power forward, and he is 32 years old.
what's the motive in this deal?
to get off James Wiseman's money to save some money against the apron right there. Because if you have some likely bonuses that could hit for the Pacers, they could become a first apron team. So he makes just a little bit less. So
Okay.
that's the reason you do it.
I was wondering what the motive was over here because I'm like Anthony Gill. I don't think he's going to contribute to
No,
anything
no, no,
here
no.
other than putting a little bit of extra money in the pockets of the team. But yeah, so I can't say I like it. I can't
Oh, I
say
don't love it. It's just
yeah,
a deal.
exactly.
It's a money. It's like a. It's very similar to the Corey Joseph deal last year.
yes, correct.
You
Whereas
could
basically,
probably do it without taking Anthony Gill back.
I honestly think you can. I think you
Yeah, because
can.
it would go into their cap space. They could just cut somebody.
Yeah, and I
They
think in
probably
that
would waive him
scenario,
too.
that would be more appealing for the Pacers.
Yeah.
What do you got next, or do you want me to go?
Well, you go next because I've only got like two more left in this,
Okay.
and you've got like four, I think,
Yeah.
four or
So I got
five.
five. Yeah, exactly. So for my fifth deal, or we'll call it the second, whatever you want to rank it as.
Number two for you.
Number two. So in this deal, it's Brooklyn and it's the Pacers. All right, and here it is. So it's the Indiana's given up Isaiah Jackson and two second round picks, the 2025 heavily protected Miami pick, and then either 2027 Utah or the Phoenix pick swap of 2028, either one that Brooklyn's interested in for Day'Ron Sharp. What are your thoughts on that? You get Sharp for this season. You could see whatever happens in the offseason, but it's just an expiring deal. Indiana gets help at center. They get off a second round pick that means nothing to them. And then Isaiah Jackson, maybe if Brooklyn likes him, maybe they could bring him back. That's up to them.
It's interesting. I really like Day'Ron Sharp as a player. I
Mhm.
don't think he fits necessarily like what the Pacers like in their center because I think that with Thomas Bryant, he spreads the floor where Day'Ron
Yes,
Sharp doesn't
definitely
do
does.
any of that stuff. We talked about that before. And then like if you bring Day'Ron Sharp on, like is he going to be happy being the third string center behind Thomas Bryant? I don't think he's going to love that. And so now it's like, does he really want to come back to Indiana, or do you feel like he's better than Thomas Bryant and you take away Thomas Bryant's role, who has been very good for this team recently, and put Day'Ron Sharp in there? That's the only thing I think it makes it really more interesting for competitive level between Bryant and Day'Ron Sharp because Sharp is so young.
Yep.
But I think that the way Bryant's produced since he's been here, I would rather have Bryant at this point just because you kind of know what you got with him, and I think he fits really well with this team. And like, I feel like if they wanted Day'Ron Sharp, they could have already had him. You know what I
Probably,
mean?
honestly. I don't think the asking
It's
price
just
is going to be too
here's
high.
here's
Probably will be moved.
here's my question back to you, just with this
Yeah.
trade. Would you rather re-sign Day'Ron Sharp long term, or would you rather re-sign Isaiah Jackson long term, assuming he can get healthy from this Achilles?
See, that's the thing is like I'm still the old school mindset where like an Achilles tear is like a death sentence in sports of like you're never going to be the same. And we've seen Kevin Durant, prove that to be wrong, but that's one of the greatest players of all time. We've seen plenty of other players never recover from that. So with Isaiah Jackson, the thing is like I think you have more of that like loyalty of paying him for what he's done. Like, hey, compared to Day'Ron Sharp, or maybe you're more business like of like, hey, we're going to pay you based off of production. So moving forward. So I think that's the thing is if Isaiah Jackson never got hurt, I'm really excited about him this year and moving forward. And
Yeah,
you hope that he could become the same player, but you also have to, put on your glasses and look at it correctly and say, hey, this is a guy who really didn't take steps forward offensively. So if he's not going to have that same type of spring or energy, things like that, then you have to think twice. But he would be coming back at a discount. For Day'Ron Sharp, good player. I would like to see on a winning team. Could
yeah.
you be just as good as what you're putting up on a losing team?
Yeah, and I think we saw enough from Isaiah Jackson throughout the playoffs to feel confident about him as a backup that can really, be plug and play right away. I don't know if Isaiah Jackson or Day'Ron Sharp are long-term
I
starters
don't
in the
think so either.
NBA.
Nope.
That's where it's really hard for me to like kind of visualize that, but it's a really interesting conversation. I mean, it's better to kind of trust the healthy player than Isaiah Jackson, who's already had a couple of different leg injuries since he's got here. So you can make the case. I wouldn't push against it, but I really do like Ijax, which makes it sad because like I think I said like last year at the beginning of the season, like the most like disappointing player on this team, or like the one I don't enjoy watching the most was Ijax, just because
A lot changed.
a lot has changed. She's grown a lot as a player, and so I just hate that he missed this entire season. Like it's such a bummer.
He would have been such a contributor this year, like such a contributor. Like Pacers bench is they're still good, but like man, Isaiah Jackson would have brought it on a nightly basis, and I just feel like this would have been the huge year for growth for him coming off last year. But hey, we'll never know, and hopefully the man has not played his last game as an Indiana Pacer, but contract wise and given that there's already so much good players on this team for this year, he is one of those contracts that could very well be thrown in the mix at the deadline.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's move on to your next one here because I know you got a few more still.
All right. So I do have a few more. Now tell me what you think about this one.
Okay, I'm
All right.
ready.
So this is the Pacers and the Toronto Raptors. I've brought up this name in the past. It's
Ooh.
a little bit of a blast from the past. It's Kelly Olynyk. Now it's Kelly Olynyk. He has this year and next year under contract, and the Pacers would be sending out Obi Toppin, Johnny Furphy, and a second round pick, either Utah or Phoenix. You tell me, give it to me straight.
I wouldn't do this deal.
Okay. All right. Okay. The reason why, obviously, that I like is I like a center with an extra year on his contract, given that the Turner situation is
True.
it's gaining a little bit of mystery, or I'd say over the last few days. Kelly Olynyk has always been a scrappy player. I've talked about it. One that you don't like playing against, one that you like playing with. Obi Toppin, you're talking about shedding, 3 years worth of Toppin. So that's definitely something that could be very appealing in the future. Kelly Olynyk and Obi Toppin essentially make exactly the same amount of money. It's
Right. Yeah.
Olynyk is $300,000 less. Johnny Furphy is the one that probably tips the scale in this deal, but you gotta throw in something for Toronto to take on Obi's contract.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely get the incentive there to kind of give them something, right? Like, it's just to me like Kelly Olynyk has taken such a step back in terms of
Yeah.
who he is as a player.
He's only playing 15 minutes a night. So if you look at his stats, they're not going to tell you like a full story. But like if he's coming to Indiana, yeah, he's probably not going to play more than 15 to 20. But he's just someone that like as a backup big is a good backup big. And he's still shooting the ball well, he can rebound, he can hustle, all of that stuff. But yeah, it's definitely not the Kelly Olynyk of 3 to 5 years ago.
Yeah, my biggest question too, and I know this sounds so crazy because I keep bringing it up. It's like you trade for another backup center, like especially one that's making that much money. Do you think that the Pacers would rather play Kelly Olynyk behind Miles Turner, or would they rather play Thomas Bryant, who has? I mean, I think Thomas Bryant has been
He's played
absolutely
well. Yes.
incredible for his
Yeah.
role.
No, he really has played his role very well, and I just still feel like it's such a blessing that Indiana was able to get Thomas Bryant for what they got him for. But when
Yeah,
we're talking about also like spreading the floor, it's only 1.7 attempts per game, but Kelly Olynyk shooting 49% from three this year,
yeah.
as
On how
compared
many attempts do you know?
1.7, like I mentioned. So, for his career, he's a 37% three-point shooter. So he's had success from three. He's been a solid rebounder and passer in the past. So we're talking about as a backup big, not a starter. Even if Turner left, I still wouldn't feel great about Kelly Olynyk being our starting center. I would just know that like maybe what if Ajax comes back and you have a combination of Isaiah Jackson, Kelly Olynyk? It's not great, but it's not something to say Indiana's in, a world of trouble here. But it'd be shaky ground, but there's not a scenario where if Turner walks and Ajax isn't healthy and you're in trouble.
Okay, let me just kind of go back with a counter here because I did have a Toronto Raptors trade as well, Facci.
What do you got?
So mine's a little bit different, but it is kind of along the same lines. I had Obi Toppin and Isaiah Jackson going to Toronto for Davion Mitchell, who is an expiring contract, who has been reported to be, they'd be
Oh,
willing to
that
trade him for second round picks, and Chris Boucher. So you're basically just offloading Obi Toppin's contract to the Raptors, someone they could probably, I think, actually would fit their team decently. For Mitchell and Chris Boucher, who probably aren't part of their long term plans, it does give the Pacers a little bit more depth at the center spot with Boucher. I still think that I would rather have uh, Thomas Bryant continue to play in that role, even though Boucher, has torched the Pacers at times, and I do like Davion Mitchell as like a prospect. I don't know if he'd play much. I still think that that would be interesting to kind of see at the guard spot, but it works salary wise perfectly. But I was trying to think like, could the Raptors kind of kick the can down the road a little bit, get a restricted free agent in Isaiah Jackson, who I think would be a very nice center for them if they wanted to resign him. He gets healthy. Plus Obi Toppin's 3-point shooting for two guys that probably aren't part of their long term plans. Pacers save some salary to try and resign Miles Turner.
the first thought that I had is like, where is Mitchell playing at all? And I actually feel like he's got some game. Like he's improved as a defender.
Yeah,
Like, I feel like he's better than just not playing at all.
yeah,
So that was my first kind of like gripe is just like, man, there's no playing time for him. And
right.
then you look at Boucher like being an expiring contract, like I like that. He's also a solid player in terms of like, you know, you can slide him in there, and I think he's doing a lot of similar things to Obi Toppin. Like from a numbers standpoint, at least they're averaging basically around the same points per game. Boucher's shooting 50% from the field, about 37% from three. Like the rebounding's close, so I don't think there's going to be like that much of a drop off. Different style of play, but still, production wise, very similar. If there was a playing route for Davion Mitchell, then I like the deal. I just
Yeah.
feel like unfortunately there isn't, and I think he would just kind of be like included in the deal.
Yeah, that's kind of what it is for me. Like it's more so just trying to get he's an expiring contract. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
It sounds rough, but I do like the idea of being able to shed the salary because it makes it easier to re-sign Turner. It just gives you options.
yeah.
And that's something that like people forget that it's like Andrew Nemhard's contract is kicking in next year. It's
Yep.
kicking in at the same time that you need to sign Turner, at the same time that Benedict Mathurin wants to get paid. Like this is a pickle that Indiana is in right now. And I know we like all these guys, but someone has to go, and the deal that Indiana makes might not necessarily be a deal that makes them significantly better. At some point, they need to make a financial deal, and we don't know if that's going to come now or in the offseason, but it's coming at some point, everybody.
Let me ask you this question because our good friend Rooster, he reached out, texted me, gave me a trade idea. I'm not going to say what it was, but we did have a conversation, and he said if you had to pick between Neesmith and Toppin, who would you trade? And I said Toppin 10 out of 10 times.
I
It
think
wasn't even like a question for
no
me.
hesitation. Didn't even need you to finish the sentence. I just feel like Neesmith's contract is better, but also like this team from a defensive standpoint, like Aaron Neesmith, like Obi Toppin, good player, fits the style, all that. But I do feel like he's replaceable, and I know that that sounds rough because you can make an argument who isn't replaceable. There's certain guys that are, there's certain guys that aren't. Aaron Neesmith can fit in anywhere that you're going to have him fit in. He's played multiple positions, doesn't need the ball. When he's shooting, he can shoot the ball well. I just feel like 10 out of 10 times you're moving Toppin over Neesmith.
Yeah, I said 10,000%. When he said, "Are you sure about that?" I said 10,000%. He said, "You seem
Okay.
pretty sure." I said, "Well, here's the thing. Neesmith is like borderline a starter. Like
Yep.
legitimately could be starting
Could be.
if this situation wasn't the way that it is. And like he was a starter last year on the team that made it to the Eastern Conference Finals and was really good in his role. Obi Toppin is a proven backup. He tried starting for the Pacers, was not good as a starter. They put Jalen Smith in over him to be the starting power forward because he wasn't good enough defensively. They go trade for Siakam. He does a great job off the bench. I love what Obi Toppin brings off the bench in terms of with this team, but if you're going to have to cut one of these two salaries, I know that there may be a little bit of redundancy at Aaron Neesmith's position because of Shepard, because of Walker, because of Matherin. You just don't give up on guys that are that impactful defensively, in my opinion, and that are that good to be a starter. I think you find other ways to make that work.
I also feel like people are a little bit quick to forget about Neesmith's like impact because he missed so much time.
Right.
But I just think back to like Jalen Brunson absolutely cooking the Pacers in the first round. Like Nemhard had no answers, and it was like Neesmith he was giving Brunson fits,
Yeah.
and I feel like that's what we really need to think back as like the impact that Neesmith was making. So I'm right there with you on that. Plus, lastly, what tips the scale for me? 2 years left on Aaron Neesmith's deal at $11 million flat, while
Yeah.
Obi Toppin has 3 more years after this, and it goes up. It goes from 12.9 all the way up to about $16 million.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big deal right there. So, it's a tough contract right there.
It is.
That's viewed more negatively than Neesmith. So I think people kind of underestimate too, like how much more Obi Toppin is making than a guy that could be a starter. So give me your next trade though.
All right, next trade on the list. I am 3 trades down. We're moving our way up. It's going to be a name that I broke out last time. He was pretty high on my list. He ain't going nowhere. All right, it's the Pacers and the Wizards. In this deal, Indiana's sending out Obi Toppin, their own 2025 second round pick, and the 2027 second round pick for Utah for Jonas Valanciunas and Patrick Baldwin Jr. just as a throw in. Give it to me straight. What do you got?
I don't love it.
Okay. Indiana saves $626,000. I know that does not sound like a lot at all, but you have 2 more years for Valanciunas under contract. That means that you're getting off Obi Toppin's, remaining 3 years. You give up a second round pick this year that is like absolutely cannot be on the roster and will likely be traded. The Utah second round pick, I think for a team like Washington, they want those type of assets. Valanciunas, I believe, is going to be traded for what you find in between your couch cushions.
Yeah,
At
I
the
think
deadline.
Toppin's too much for him. in my opinion.
Okay, you think so? I mean, you can make an argument like that. You could. I don't want to
I
like,
I
you know.
think sending Toppin somewhere else
Okay.
and sending another player like that, a team that doesn't want a guy like that makes round Toppin's money. Like there's a perfect example here that's like it doesn't make sense because it's who the Wizards already have, but like Marvin Bagley, that's like the third or whatever his
Yeah.
is it the second or the third?
I think it's
He's
fair.
he's got $12 million expiring right now.
Mhm.
So like let's just say like for example, like let's just say like the Clippers had him, right? It would make sense to send Obi to the Clippers and then Marvin Bagley that expiring deal to Washington and then send Valanciunas to the Pacers. That would make more sense to me than Obi just kind of being put on that Wizards roster. You know what
Yeah,
I
look,
mean?
I'd feel bad for him too. I mean, nobody wants to play that. I'm hearing things like Kyle Kuzma's growing impatient. It's like, yeah, the man's losing every night. I don't blame him. But it's like
Yeah.
I'd feel bad for Obi. But hey, it's not like his money's gonna change. You know, he would still be financially protected. But I think yeah, no one wants to go from a winning team with your friends where everyone's having happy, being happy to the lowly Wizards. But I think from a standpoint of like you get Valanciunas as a backup center for this year, you hope to sign Turner. Even if you re-sign Turner and have Valanciunas, you have a good situation at center, or you could just flip Valanciunas a year later when he's an expiring contract. So, there's options, but I think it's a trade that people would say, oof, give me Obi over Valanciunas, but it's more of the financial savings in this while also being able to get some security at center.
I will just tell you this, Facci. I have a trade coming up later
Okay.
that does have Jonas Valanciunas coming to the Pacers that I made.
Interesting. He's growing on you, isn't he?
That he made, but it is not for this deal because I don't like
Okay.
this deal.
Okay, that's fine. That's
But
fine.
I'll
Do
move
tell
on
me
to
what
my
you want.
last
Yeah.
medium deal that I have here. And this is a 3 team deal. And I thought it made a lot of sense. And I want to hear your thoughts on this. So the Pacers are going to trade Obi Toppin to the Atlanta Hawks. Okay.
Okay.
The Rockets are going to trade Steven Adams and 2 second-round picks to Indiana. They're also going to send Jeff Green to
Oh,
Atlanta.
top spot. Okay.
Now, the Rockets are going to acquire Clint Capella back from the Hawks, an expiring big at about $22 million to back up uh, Sengun. They already have Jock Landau there.
Yeah.
The Pacers get Steven Adams, center depth, right, that we've been talking about. He's on an expiring deal for $12 million. You also get 2 second-round picks to play with that are future picks. The Hawks, they've kind of already got their center rotation lined up right now. The Okongwu starting, I believe it is. They've already
Yep.
been playing Larry Nance Jr. as their backup five. So add Obi Toppin into that mix. I think it does make some sense for them in the style they play, kind of similar to the Pacers. Run and gun, shoot the ball a lot. And then I think it just, they get off Capella's long term deal because they've been talking about trading Capella for the last couple of seasons. So
So
I just,
Capella's an expiring at this point.
yeah, 22 million. So I just, to me, it's kind of like you kind of shift a lot of expiring deals where Toppin just goes to the Hawks. Pacers get off that money. They have Steven Adams, good veteran guy, won't mess up with their locker room. I think he'll actually be good for them, kind of have another enforcer out there like Steven Adams and James Johnson, who's messing with this team.
No,
Plus
nobody.
2 second-round picks, and it opens up some playing time for Jarris Walker.
It really does. So this makes you feel a little bit better that Obi would be going to like a play-in team,
Yes.
instead of the bottom of the East. Okay, I just wanted to get that across. No, but look, I think in this situation, I would do it because you're talking about in my last deal when Valanciunas is going to the Pacers, you still have 2 years at about $9.5 million. In this situation, you're wiping the books clean. I mean, you're really you're getting off the remaining 3 years at whatever it might be $40 million or so. Saving on Obi Toppin. The 2 second round picks, hey, that's something to play with. Indiana will have a boatload of second round picks. So I do think that that's very interesting, and I think that Steven Adams, no one has ever associated him anything other than being a great teammate.
Yeah.
He's not playing a lot for the Rockets, so you can't look at stats and tell a whole story. He plays 11 minutes. Just last year, he was averaging 11 and a half rebounds. So, like, that guy is a great rebounder. If you're going to put him on the court, you know what you're going to get. I would do the deal if it was, presented.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt too. And I know it's like, man, this is tough because you don't want to just trade Toppin for nothing. But I think at this point, it does make sense if your goal is long term to re-sign Miles Turner. If it comes down to keeping Turner or Toppin, we've talked about this ad nauseum. Like, I'm not going to keep a backup power forward over my starting center. So that's where I'm at with that. So that was my last of the medium deals. I think you have 2 more left.
I got two more left.
All right,
So,
let's do your 2, and then we'll go to my remaining 6.
remaining six. Wow.
They'll be
Okay.
quick. They'll be quick because
So,
they're kind of categorized together.
So these are some names I brought up last time. So here's what we got. It's a two-team deal. It's the Pacers and the Bulls. In this situation, Indiana's sending out Obi Toppin, their own 2025 second round pick, and a 2025 second round pick that is protected by Miami. If the Bulls want the Charlotte one, they can have that. It's heavily protected too. Two names I brought up last time: Jalen Smith and Torrey Craig. In this situation, here's what we got. Jalen Smith, after this year, has 2 years left at about $8.5 million. Torrey Craig is expiring. What are your thoughts?
So repeat the deal one more time. So Obi Toppin going to Chicago.
Obi Toppin and two 2025 second round picks for Jalen Smith and Torrey Craig. Torrey
I
Craig.
see the logic behind it.
Yeah. So you got Jalen Smith, who you're very familiar with. Now all of a sudden, Indiana's center rotation, you feel really good about it. Hey, he's under contract. We've always felt that like he's a fringe starter. You don't feel great about him being your long-term starting center, but like the situation could be way worse. You know exactly what you're getting out of Jalen Smith. The contract is really good compared to if they're talking about Turner at $30 million, you're talking about Jalen Smith at 8.5. It's about basically about a quarter of that deal.
Let me ask you these two questions. If you have Jalen Smith or Thomas Bryant as your backup center, who is getting the second unit minutes?
I would think Jalen Smith would.
Okay, so you put Thomas Bryant back to third string.
Yes.
Okay. Now here's a big question. You trade Obi Toppin. Who's your backup power forward? Jarris
Jarris
Walker or
Walker.
Torrey Craig?
Jarris Walker.
What do you think Rick Carlisle does?
Probably Torrey Craig. I mean, he probably goes the opposite way. I'll just say it like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just asking. Like,
Yeah,
do we want to
no.
give him that option?
I definitely hear you on that. I definitely don't think that it's as easy for him to be like, oh,
What?
Jarris Walker, of course.
Hey,
But
what if we change it up and do Jalen Smith and Chris Duarte
just bring him back
for
to
Obi Toppin and James Wiseman?
I mean, I would still do it. I mean, it's just let me see I mean, at this point, Duarte's got to be expiring, right? I
He's
feel like
expiring 5 points of the $1 million.
yeah.
Bring
Duarte
Duarte home.
doesn't even. I was about to say he doesn't even need to.
See the court.
Yeah, he's not stepping on the court. It's
And
one
he
thing
would,
if.
and I think he would be fine locker room wise.
Oh yeah, no, he totally would, and I think that this, at least the coaching staff has familiarity with him. But yeah, he definitely would not be playing in the situation. I think Torrey Craig is bringing more value, more 3 and D. But that's also someone that is familiar with Indiana. Maybe not too many of these teammates as the roster's flipped over. But I think in this situation, Torrey Craig was actually significantly cheaper. But I guess that's where you're talking about throwing in Wiseman. So
Yeah, I mean, because Wiseman at this point doesn't matter to me.
doesn't
I
matter to
think
me.
he's the most likely to be traded out of anybody here.
I absolutely 110% agree.
So I'm seeing if this deal works. This deal does work for both. It saves the Pacers $0.7 million by doing this
Oh, yeah.
deal.
I'm sure they'd be happy.
So, and I think it kind of simplifies a little bit of what you want to do. And they could honestly even go Jalen Smith and Thomas Bryant together in the front court if you want to play them at the 4 and the 5 versus, having Walker out there. But I just, anything to eliminate as much competition for Walker and his
I
minutes
know,
is
I
what I
know.
would do.
I definitely hear you on this. I mean, it's like I think last time. I mean, we were going through some of these things. There was Jarris Walker involved in a lot more of the deals. Now it's like, look, I want to find some playing time for him. I really do. It's tough. It's hard to come by, especially now. You can see. I don't think any of us felt great seeing all of a sudden with a healthy rotation what that means for Jarris recently because if they weren't blowing out the Spurs he's getting a do not play coach decision in
Yeah,
that game, and I think that's something that you didn't expect after he's played in every single game this season.
right. All right, give me your last one here, Foch.
Last trade. All right, so here we go. It's the Pacers. It's the Hawks.
Okay.
I'm going back to my roots. The Pacers are landing DeAndre
Let's
Hunter.
go.
Here it is. I'm back. You said it. I almost lost some sleep over it. I was like, what was I thinking? A
What were you
trade
thinking?
podcast, and I don't have DeAndre Hunter in it. So here's what we got. It's Indiana and Atlanta. In this situation, it's Obi Toppin. It's the man who we just brought up. It is Jarris Walker, and it's James Wiseman for DeAndre Hunter. No picks. What do you got?
Man, this is tough. I mean, we're talking about DeAndre Hunter's been playing lights out this year, so they
He
obviously
really
want
has.
something of value.
In this situation, from a financial standpoint, Indiana takes on just 300 grand, so they can make this work.
Man, this
Obviously,
is tough.
it is really tough. It is really tough. So DeAndre Hunter has 2 years left on his contract after this. It's a good contract. Obviously, Jarris Walker is the piece that motivates Atlanta to be able to take on Obi and move off of DeAndre Hunter. But in my opinion, DeAndre Hunter is what you hope Aaron Nesmith could one day be. And I think in this situation, it does clear up some things a little bit, with this rotation of Obi and Jarris fighting for playing time. So it's tough, but this is a move that actually, at least short term, makes Indiana better. Could Jarris Walker
Yes.
one day develop? Definitely could. Definitely could. But you're getting a little bit more of a sure thing with DeAndre Hunter.
Let me ask you this because this is how I kind of just throw these trades back at you. DeAndre Hunter's 27 years old.
Yep.
Jarris Walker's what, 20?
He's probably like 2021. He's probably like 21.
So let's just say, let's just for like example, like let's just say he's 21, just if we're gonna do like
Sure.
worst possible thing here, right? I'm gonna look up his age real quick.
I got it right here. He's 21.
He's 21.
So,
Okay, so
birthday's in September, so he'll be 22 later this year.
he's just turned 21 basically. Do you feel like you're giving up too early on Jarris for this
Definitely.
move?
Yeah, I think
Does
you
DeAndre
are.
Hunter make you that much better right now?
I mean, think about this. Like Indiana's played, they've been a better team defensively this year. But like if you got Neesmith and DeAndre Hunter, like and Nemhard, I feel like you got some good defenders there. You still
Yeah.
obviously have Turner, and I think this does make you a better defensive team. He's also a good 3-point shooter, just a player who's playing good basketball. So I think yeah, you're definitely giving up early on Jarris Walker. But here's the thing, like what is Indiana's window? Like what does it look like?
That's the
You know,
tough question.
it really is because you could say right now Pascal Siakam is playing all-star basketball. Will he still be playing all-star basketball next year? You definitely hope so. Definitely hope so. But what about the year after that? That's where it starts to become like a little bit like, oh man, I don't know. It feels like these next 2 seasons is something that Indiana really has to capitalize on. And I feel like for Jarris Walker, he's not hitting his full potential this year. Probably not next year. It feels like almost like a season after that. So
Yeah.
it gets tough.
Let me just throw this one last thing out at you because I
Oh,
do know that this is very interesting because we just had a podcast conversation about Cameron Johnson
we did.
and what it would take to get him. And so this is basically like the same trade package that you would have sent out for Cameron Johnson. Do you think that DeAndre Hunter is better than Cameron Johnson?
I've like sat on it and I've thought, and I'm just like, I just think that Cameron Johnson is the definition of a good player on a really bad team, like a really bad team. And I just feel like it's like he's not averaging near 20 points per game or 18 points per game on many other teams. DeAndre Hunter, now you're seeing him have his best season on a team where the Hawks are playing pretty good basketball for at least their standards. And I just kind of think of it as like, you know what? DeAndre Hunter, I think it's just a better defender. I think this is someone that I feel like has a larger sample size of being able to do this. Like the last few years, he's averaged, over 15 points per game on good shooting percentages. He is a good 3-point shooter. He's shooting 40% from three. Last year's 38.5%. Like, in my opinion, I think that you would see Cameron Johnson's numbers drop off once he went to like a better playoff team. I think you brought it up. Like, hey, this is a guy who's basically probably about a 14 point per game scorer. Like
Right.
DeAndre Hunter right now, 18.7 points per game. I think he probably goes to Indiana. He's probably averaging about 16, but he's doing it on efficient shooting. He's really like, being a good defender and I think that that's something that would be able to help the team out. Where Cam Johnson, I'm still just a little bit like I'm hesitant on it. And the fact that the Nets are even asking for 2 first-round picks to me, it's comical. It's not going to happen. But now I start to wonder like what will that trade actually look like? And I think for Indiana, you don't want to give up a first-round pick. And I know you and I have gone back and forth. Would you rather trade the 2028 first or Jarris Walker? And I don't know. I guess I kind of lean into like the mystery a little bit of like what could that pick be? What does Indiana look like in 2028? And it's a way you could go back and forth on. But man, I kind of lean that I would rather have DeAndre Hunter than Cameron Johnson.
Yeah, I understand your case there. I mean, they're very similar players, and I do kind of wonder if Cameron Johnson was in the same role as DeAndre Hunter, would he have the same type of numbers with this Hawks team, right? Like that's kind of like what I'm wondering. I think it'd be very close. I'm not necessarily like torn on this deal or anything like that. I feel like Pacer fans would be absolutely out of their mind if we traded Jarris Walker for DeAndre Hunter at this point.
Yeah, they probably would, but I also think that we have a way of like getting very attached to certain players. And I think that if you were like to take this from someone outside of the fan base, I think they would probably be like, oh wow, DeAndre Hunter's having a really good year. Like Jarris Walker, like, hey, what type of playing time is he getting? Is he getting consistent minutes like this? It would be like totally from a different lens. Like I think also like we look at like a Johnny Furphy as like, oh, this is this really promising player. And I do believe in Furphy and I want to see him, but what does the rest of the league think? Like is that a valuable, inclusion in a deal that gets a deal done, or is it just hey, that guy's not seeing any minutes and is still 1 to 2 years away from being a meaningful rotation player? So I think sometimes people overvalue their own players, but I do think Jarris Walker, we've seen a lot of the flashes. We have seen that. Sorry for
Yeah.
that. A couple fell. But I think that you could go either way on this. I definitely agree. If you trade Jarris Walker this year, no matter what, you are giving up on him too early. But
Yeah.
if you trade him a year later and maybe he doesn't pan out, then you're not getting, what you probably hope for.
Yeah, I think I'm more on the boat of I would rather trade Aaron Nesmith than Jarris Walker
Yes. I
if
think
you can do
everybody
it.
is, right? Exactly. That's the
Yeah.
key word, if you can do it, because everybody would rather say Jarris Walker has more long-term potential than Aaron Nesmith, but I don't think a team looks at it as the same way as like that'll get the deal done. I think they look at it as
Yeah.
a great contract, good player, but Jarris Walker has a much higher ceiling.
No, for sure. I definitely understand that. So now, anything else you want to add in this?
No, I would
Or
just say those were my trades. So, hey, let's see what you got. I know you got a couple more complex deals. I know you got maybe was it six more left. So, I'm
let's
buckled up. I'm ready to rock.
all right, let's go through these quickly. I'll read them. You tell me if you like the deal or not. Okay, this is a three-team deal between the Brooklyn Nets, the Indiana Pacers, and the Milwaukee Bucks.
Okay.
The Brooklyn Nets get Obi Toppin, Aaron Nesmith, and Isaiah Jackson, as well as a 2026 first round swap with the Pelicans that the Bucks have on their roster. Okay, so you'll get that swap there. The Bucks get Cameron Johnson, James Wiseman, and Day'Ron Sharp. The Indiana Pacers make a win now move, and they trade for a guy that's not been playing well, and that's Chris Middleton.
So here's the thing. When you say not playing well, that's what worries me. I worry if you look back at it, they will say that the last great moment that Chris Middleton had was against the Indiana Pacers in the playoffs. I really do think that that's going to go down as like the final Chris Middleton, like, wow. Like, so the money scares me. It really does. So when you're talking about some of these deals, I know you're talking about getting off Obi Toppin. That's about next year, a little over $13 million. Aaron Nesmith's at 11, so that's like $24 million. You're getting off. You said James Wiseman. Was that Isaiah Jackson in this deal or no?
Isaiah Jackson, James Wiseman, Aaron Nesmith, and Obi Toppin.
Okay.
You're
So,
consolidating, and you're not getting rid of Mathurin or Walker in the deal.
so I guess in this scenario, you're talking about a player option next year of Chris Middleton at $34 million.
One
I'm
more year.
he's going to pick that up because he would not get that money on the open market. So
No,
if
but he might want longer money.
yeah, no, yeah, it's one more year. So here's what I would say. I would not feel comfortable re-signing Middleton after that. I do think that his knees are, and obviously, look, if the number's right, then that's one thing. But man, it's a win now move. It definitely
It
is a win
is.
now move. It's a win now. Like this is a guy who could take the final shot at the end of the game.
Well,
You
and
know,
that's kind of my thing. Like we saw how awesome
he was
Middleton was
incredible.
against the
He
Pacers
was
last year.
incredible. So
Imagine
clutch.
adding that type of player in this rivalry. You get this kind of player because look, there's been a lot of speculation that the Bucks can move off of Middleton because of how he's playing. There's
Yeah.
been talks about them being involved with Jimmy Butler or Zach LaVine. So I'm just saying, if Middleton is the guy they do get rid of, could Indiana be a team that's like, you know, let's make a consolidation trade now at the end of a game? Because we've seen it at times. Tyrese Halliburton has a hard time getting shots, but if you
He
have
does.
Ty, you have Mathurin, you have Middleton, you have Siakam and Miles Turner out there, plus Andrew Nimhard. That's a great six right there, in my opinion. You throw in TJ McConnell, Ben Shepherd, Jarris Walker into that mix. I think that's deep enough that, you know, obviously we've seen Middleton take his game to another level in the playoffs. I
Yeah.
think regular season, you're probably not going to be able to count on him, but that also gives you more developmental time for guys like Nimhard, Mathurin, and Wiseman, even Shepard to a point, and maybe even Johnny Furphy. So I just think that that consolidation trade makes some sense for a win now move.
I think when it started, I was out. I think I might be in now only because there's only one more year left. And I think that at that situation, it's like, okay, if there was 2 years left, I would be out because I do think that Middleton is declining. But I do think from what we talked about, he does have that clutch factor of being able to take the last shot. And I just feel like he's not playing a lot of minutes for Milwaukee. He's 23 minutes. I mean,
Yeah.
that is the fewest since his rookie season. So like you're not going to see him putting up big numbers by any means. I think he could be good in stretches, but probably not consistently throughout the season. But I do think that this would be a probably as good of a win now move as Indiana would be able to get their hands on without mortgaging a big part of the future. So I think I would be in on this deal because it doesn't involve like a Jarris Walker or a first round pick.
Yeah, so I basically had different versions of this, and I called this the Chris Middleton deals. I didn't want to spoil that too much there at the beginning and just like be like, okay, here's the rest of them. So the other ones I had was a four-team deal with the Bulls, the Bucks, the Pacers, and the Pistons. Because the Bucks are I think they're a second apron team, they cannot combine salaries to aggregate, so they would have to offload Connaughton plus picks to the Pistons to absorb into their space. Pacers get Middleton, the Bucks get Zach LaVine and James Wiseman. The Bulls would get Neesmith, Toppin, Bobby Portis, and Isaiah Jackson. So kind of a similar deal, but it's just different players. I just think Zach LaVine, obviously, there's been a lot of question marks with his fit in
Yeah.
Chicago. Like, do the Pacers want to help Milwaukee get potentially better with Zach LaVine and Dame Lillard in the backcourt? But I think that that's such a defensive eyesore. It'd be worth maybe, allowing that to happen. Snag Middleton off there, get one of their like anchors and Bobby Portis off their roster. So it made some sense to me.
So Indiana walks away with Middleton. Is there anyone else in this
No,
deal?
just Middleton again, kind of similar to the other deal.
Okay. All right. Okay. So now it comes
It's the
down to
same players
yeah, I can
involved.
see why Indiana wants to do this. So who do the Bulls end up with?
Neesmith, Toppin, Bobby Portis, and Isaiah Jackson.
I feel like they would do that. I think they would. Zach
For
Levine's got a
Levine.
great contract. Yeah, yeah. You're breaking it up into a bunch of smaller pieces, and I think then you'd have like a very well-rounded team. And look, Zach Levine's playing very good basketball this year.
Yeah.
He really is. Like for a guy, I mean, it sounded like it's crazy for a guy as good as he is. Nobody wanted to touch him with a 10-foot pole, this offseason. And I think that he's gotten his value up. So it remains to be interesting, but I think like a guy like that would help Milwaukee out. I think he would.
Okay. My last one was a six-team deal because I just had to throw it in there for you. This is the Phoenix, Miami, Detroit, Chicago, Milwaukee, Indiana deal. So I really didn't throw like the picks in there that I would throw in there, but basically here's how it worked. Chicago gets Bradley Beal. He waives his no trade clause to go play for Chicago and his former coach Billy Donovan. The Bucks get Zach LaVine. The Pacers get Chris Middleton. The Pistons will absorb Pat Connaughton plus picks. The Suns get Jimmy Butler. The Heat would then get Obi Toppin, Bobby Portis, Aaron Neesmith, Chris Duarte, Isaiah Jackson, James Wiseman, and picks.
Whew, lot to unpack. So the Heat are getting a ton of players, right?
Yes, they're basically breaking Jimmy Butler's contract into Obi Toppin,
Mhm.
Bobby Portis,
Yep.
Aaron Neesmith for this season. They would get the expiring deals basically of Duarte, Jackson, and Wiseman.
And are they just cutting those players just pretty much
I would
a lot
assume
of players to bring in?
I would assume
Yeah.
they would have to like
Yeah.
cut some guys that they already have on their roster, but
They
they
would
have
have.
about four players already on expiring deals, like Alec Burks, Kevin Love. I know he's been a part of their team, but like they're already getting all these bigs. It would make sense to let him go. What's his face? Josh Richardson.
Mhm.
So there's like guys they could cut to make this deal work where they absorb all these players.
And do they get any picks?
They do get picks. I
I was
remember the
gonna say.
Suns traded that
Yeah,
2031
yeah.
pick for like
Yeah.
three first round
Yeah.
picks. They're going to get some of those picks to
What I
go
was
to
gonna
them.
say. Because those players are like, helpful short term, but they would need first round picks.
For
So,
sure.
so I see why this deal makes sense for Indiana. I think if you're Miami, I think you have to get Jimmy Butler off of this
Yeah.
roster, like by the deadline, because they're like they keep suspending him, and it's like you're running out of time before it's like you're probably not gonna fix this relationship right now. It seems to be pretty deep. So I think that they would in that situation, they have to act fast. I think, is it the best deal for them? I don't know. They're not getting like that next star-ish type player, but I don't think one of those guys is going to be available for them.
Yeah,
So
maybe you flip Duarte and Jackson to the Detroit and you send Connaughton to the Heat instead to kind of clear up some of that roster flexibility stuff. I mean, I'm just kind of talking this one out here, but I just think if you can get Bobby Portis, Aaron Neesmith, and Heat culture, That
Yeah.
they seem to be
No,
like
yeah.
the perfect guys for that.
I think they would have I think they would honestly have a good team, like because I think they would just have a lot of guys that are going to play really hard. So
Yeah.
I think that would be good. And then in that situation, the Pistons, they're just absorbing. Is that what all is?
Just absorbing and getting picks
Yeah.
for absorbing because Pat Connaughton's got a expiring deal next year.
Mhm.
That's
Okay.
easily tradable.
I think it makes sense for all teams. I think that, of course Miami probably dreams of something bigger, but I just don't think it's going to be there. And then for the Bucks, they're walking you said Chicago's getting
Bradley
um
Beal,
Bradley Beal, and then who are the Bucks getting in
Zach
this?
Levine.
Zach Levine. Okay, it makes sense for all parties. I think it does. If Chicago, if Bradley Beal would agree to go to Chicago. I mean,
Yeah.
that's really the thing is like, is that where you want to lift your no trade clause to? Like,
It's like the Suns clearly don't want you, and like
I
nobody
know
else
they
really
don't.
does.
Yeah, like he's
Could you revive
clearly.
your career with your head coach from Florida? I think it makes sense.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that. I think if he's open to doing that, like he's obviously the guy that can just derail this whole entire trade. So, hey, hopefully your old head coach likes you enough to want to bring you in and all that. So I think it makes sense. It's obviously just the rare 6-team trade involving numerous all stars and all of that stuff. So
Yeah.
tough to happen, but it makes sense though.
Yeah, I think if you're completely out on Chris Middleton, then you probably hate all three of those deals, and you're like, let's
That,
just keep the team
that's the
as
thing.
is.
Yeah,
And
like I
I can
like.
totally understand that. I think that I would probably be 50-50 on it. You could talk me into either side of the coin for that one because
Yeah.
I saw what Chris Middleton did last year, and like that's the lasting image I have in my head. Like I know that he's had a long injury history and he's not played a lot of regular season games, but when Chris Middleton is healthy, Chris Middleton is so clutch in the playoffs. Like he's a game changer come playoff time.
Yes.
And I know there's a reason why Milwaukee has coveted him so much. But even our good friend Ty Wendish was talking about like, he would be okay with him trading Middleton. And I threw out the idea, would you do it for Cam Johnson? He's like, it's really close. I don't think I would want to do it for just Cam Johnson. So that's why I threw Day'Ron Sharp in there too, because that gives them some more center depth.
I think if the Bucks have that opportunity, they got to do that. I feel like I know Giannis like loves Middleton and they have like that loyalty to each other, but like the best of Middleton, I do believe is behind him, and that's rightfully say because he's not going to be an all-star anymore. But yeah, you are going to get some big moments. But I think when it comes to like the trade that we talked about being able to get off like I think it was like Obi Toppin, Aaron Nesmith, and bringing Middleton like that, like no picks or anything like that. I do like it. I do
Yeah.
like it, but I also am realistic to know that like Middleton's not going to be a guy that's going to be out there for 82 games. He's
No.
not. You're going to have to scale him
35,
back at
40 at
times.
max.
Exactly. You're going to have to scale him back, and it's more about what could he do in the playoffs.
Yep.
So there's going to be a side that says I'm absolutely 110% out. I might wake up on any other day and say I'm totally out, and then on a day like today, I'm kind of like, you know what? I could see at times, like we talked about, Halliburton's getting double teamed. Who's taking the last shot? You really don't know. And I think with Middleton on the roster, you know who's taking that last shot.
Okay, Facci. I still have three trades left. Let me ask you this. It is 9:30 right now as we are recording, and there's about 7 minutes left in this Bills game. It's tied 29-29 all. Do you want to can these and save it for another episode? Or do you want to take a break, go watch rest game, and come back and record after that?
I do not want to come back after this. So,
Okay.
you give it to me straight. If you want to go through them quick,
I
I'm
can
here
go through
for
them
it.
quick if you'd
Now,
like, but I do think that it could be a whole entire podcast conversation. So maybe we can just save this.
let's save it.
Okay, this is a little bit of a teaser here because look, there's been a lot of reports out there about Miles Turner, and I know everyone's losing their mind, especially our good friend Rooster, who we always bring up on this podcast. But like, he has been ruthless on Twitter,
I've seen a
using
lot of
multiple
replies,
profanities on
checking
every single
people.
thing involving Miles Turner to the Lakers. Look, I don't think the Lakers make a lot of sense unless it's a massive deal that you're getting another great player back, and I'll explain that later. But I've got three Miles Turner trade ideas if you feel like Miles Turner is going to be a guy the Pacers will not re-sign. There's been some speculation that rival executives don't believe the Pacers will pay Turner what he's wanting. And so maybe we just can that. Maybe we record that on Tuesday
Oh, yeah,
night.
totally a whole different episode right
Okay.
there. I mean, Miles deserves his own episode rather than
Right.
just a segment because it is that big of a decision for the Indiana Pacers.
Yeah. So there is some spicy stuff that I came up with, and I actually threw some out at our good friend Bryce Simon, who covers the Detroit Pistons and is on the Game Theory podcast with Sam Vecini, was just on here recently when you weren't able to make it. So he actually really liked one of the ideas I came up with, the Turner trade. So, and it was not to the Lakers. So I think that'll just be a nice little teaser there. But Facci, let's go ahead and wrap this one up. Good conversation here, talking about trade ideas. And, if you hate Chris Middleton, I'm sorry. I'm sure you hated the last 10, 15 minutes of this podcast. But if you're intrigued by Chris Middleton in the playoffs, I think this is what could make it, worthwhile. But, it's just an interesting conversation more so. I think I lean more towards don't break it up right now. Maybe you make that decision in the offseason, especially if Chris Middleton goes off again. But right now, I'm just wanting this Pacers team to continue just to grow with who they have. So any final thoughts before we part?
No, I think these were a lot of names that could spark a debate. I don't think that there's many home run deals for the Pacers because we did want to be realistic. Look, if Indiana's going to get anyone good, it's going to take significant players. And I think that right now, we weren't willing to give up future first round picks. There was maybe one deal period that had Jarris Walker in it. There was no Ben Mathurin or Andrew Nembhard or anything like that. It just shows that this Pacers team is good and we want to make them better, but at what cost? Yeah. And I think that's where we're all in agreement. We're playing really good basketball right now. We don't want to shake it up. But if the right deal is out there, you got to be ready for it.
Absolutely. So Pacer fans, thanks so much for tuning in. And once again, kind of like our trade, our top 10 trade targets list, this is more of an exercise than it is hey, we would definitely do these deals. It's just conversation to have. So don't freak out. Don't lose your mind. But with that being said, we thank you all so much for listening and supporting this podcast. This will probably be the end of part 2. So I will have some other stuff in between here that you might not hear on this original recording. But with that being said, Facci, if you're hoping the Pacers get back to their winning ways against the Detroit Pistons on Wednesday, hit me with those 3 words.
Let's go, Pacers!